The room spoke in low light and soft money. Manhattan's most guarded dining room glowed like a jewel box, warm as candle wax and quiet as a chapel. The tables were dressed in white. The silverware had that heavy, old-world weight that tells you it is expensive without saying a word. A piano in the bar traced out a slow, Italian melody that did not draw attention. It simply set the pace of the evening and kept it there. Catherine Novak moved through this air as if she belonged to it and also stood apart from it. Her uniform was black, pressed, without a wrinkle. She kept her hair neat and her sleeves clean. She did not waste steps. She did not bump a chair or a knee. She saw hands that needed water before they lifted a glass. She saw plates that needed to leave before a diner knew the thought had formed. People at these tables never looked up when she stopped at their side. She was a service like air or heat, useful, invisible. Her eyes never drifted. They measured, left to right, front to back, window to kitchen, door to bar. The habit was not new. 6 years in a different uniform had taught her that calm is something you build. It is not something the world gives you. The smell of the room was butter, truffle, old wood, and money. It covered the street outside like a soft blanket. It did not change the street. It only told the people inside that the street could not reach them. Table 7 was the corner table everyone wanted. 2 men sat there. One spoke a lot, one did not. The talker was Gerard Peterson. His suit was a shade too light for winter. He pushed his napkin to the side after every sentence, as if each point needed a place to land. He was a senior partner at a firm whose name sounded like a list of marble pillars. He looked careful and tired, the way men look when they carry details inside their heads and charged by the hour to share them. Across from him sat a man who did not need to get louder to be heard. People knew him by other names and other roles, but the truth of him was simple. He wrote his own rules. He kept them. Others learned them. He did not chase noise. He did not sell himself. The city used one title for him, the press used another, and neither was spoken in this room. On the reservation card, he was Mr. A. DeLuca. He wore a dark suit with a clean line, a plain white shirt, and a narrow tie. A signet ring caught the candlelight when he reached for his glass. A gold chain rested close to the skin, almost hidden. His watch was old and elegant and said nothing. "By Friday, Ethelred is yours," Peterson said, keeping his voice low. "The last holdouts are coming in. We have their language. The board will sign." Adrian DeLuca did not smile. He lifted his glass and let the bourbon sit for a second. He tasted it. He set the glass back on the table without looking at it. "The papers close," he said. "Exactly," Peterson replied, relief passing over his face. "We positioned the severance. The optics should be manageable." "No one is an optic," DeLuca said. "Make the numbers clean." Peterson nodded quickly. "Of course." Catherine stepped in just as the appetizer plates needed to go. She did it the way she did everything. Quietly, cleanly. She did not hover. She did not perform. She lifted plates, one hand steady, one hand free, and scanned the table edge for crumbs. She could feel the weight in the room at this corner. It was not volume, it was pressure. The man at the far side of table 7 did not look at her when she asked, "Will you be needing anything else, Mr. DeLuca?" He lifted 2 fingers a half inch from the table. "The check," he said. "The car moves in 10. "Of course," she answered. At the bar, Frank Miller sat with a club soda and a face that did not belong at the bar. He was a large man who knew how to stand near doors and how to look at hands. His jacket was a size too small across the shoulders. His eyes were on the room without being obvious. He did not drink when he worked. He did not leave his seat when the principal was seated. Catherine had noted him when she came on at 5 and then again at 8. She noted him every 20 minutes as a matter of habit. He was there. He stayed there. That was what security looked like when it was competent, reliable, boring. She turned from table 7 and caught the big front windows out of the corner of her eye. The glass that ran from floor to ceiling was a wall of light. The city reflected back on it like a painting. Cars hummed by. People moved. She had learned not to stare. Tonight her eyes stayed a fraction longer than they should have. A black utility van sat across the street. It had no side windows. It was double parked in a way that made no sense for a delivery. The engine was likely still running. This did not mean anything on its own. This was New York. Vans idled. People broke parking rules. She told herself the same line she had told herself for 2 years of quiet. Chaos is normal. She almost accepted it. Then she saw the shadow in the alley. A man in a dark hoodie leaned with his back to the brick. He held a phone to his ear. His body did not fit the call. His feet were wrong. His head was turned toward the restaurant entrance as if the person on the line had nothing to do with him at all. Her heart rose one beat and then leveled. She set 2 plates at a bus station. She folded a napkin with clean edges. She moved to the host stand and glanced to the bar. The club soda sat on a square napkin with a ring of water below it. The straw wrapper lay on the wood. The stool was empty. Frank Miller's seat should not have been empty. She did not change her pace. She took a leather folder from the host and brought it to table 7. A Mont Blanc pen scratched the paper in a neat hand. The total would not surprise anyone at this table. "Sir," Catherine said, keeping her voice low, "your security is no longer at the bar." "He's checking the car," Peterson said, as if he needed to fill the space with an answer. "Frank knows his job," DeLuca said without looking up. Catherine's eyes flicked to the half-full glass, the water ring, the empty stool. It was wrong. Men like Frank did not drift. They did not leave a post without tapping a shoulder and saying one sentence. The man in the alley was gone. The van remained. She walked for the kitchen with her hand calm at her side and her mind running. She needed a landline. The office had one. The sound of the room softened behind her. The door was 3 steps ahead. She touched the steel, and then the night inside the restaurant tore open. The front glass did not shatter outward. It folded in, 1,000 pieces pushed by a sound that felt like a blow. Diners dropped and screamed. A high, sharp note made itself known inside the body and then kept sounding. Catherine saw 5 men shape themselves in the black frame where the window had been a moment earlier. Their clothes were dull black, not glossy. Their masks were pulled low. They moved with the same economy she respected in a clean kitchen. No one wasted emotion. One carried a jammer. Phones died in the room like lights go out when the power cuts. 2 took the room and pressed it down with small, dark pistols that coughed instead of barked. 1 stayed at the entrance and watched the street. 2 more had a line to table 7. "Nobody move," one of the flank men said. The voice was low and rough. "Palms where I can see them, on the floor." Catherine's back touched the wall by the kitchen door. She looked at the dining room as a map. She saw the lines of sight. She saw where the hostages could panic and trample each other. She saw where someone might try to be brave and get shot. She saw where the team had allowed a blind spot because it was a restaurant and not a warehouse. This was not a robbery. Sleeves full of watches did not draw their eyes. Diamonds did not pull their hands. They were here for a person. She watched the 2 men reach table 7. Gerard Peterson folded under the table, his hands over his head. He made a sound like someone who wanted to disappear completely and could not. The tall one put a gloved hand on Adrian DeLuca's forearm and pulled him out of the booth. DeLuca came up fast because the hand had force, not because he allowed it. Surprise crossed his face for half a second, then went away. The leader leaned in, close enough for a whisper. "Adrian DeLuca," he said. "The ghosts of Ethel send their regards. You owe a debt." Catherine did not need the rest of the sentence to know this had a purpose. The name was personal. The message was not written for television. It was for a man they despised, a man they believed had destroyed a father, a company, a life. The room shook with other people's fear. For Catherine, it went quiet. Her eyes cut to a service sun within reach. A heavy silver tray lay there. A tall bottle of mineral water stood beside it. The closest flanker had his attention in the wrong direction. His weapon hand was low. His back quarter was open. Her first duty was not the man they were taking. It was the people on the floor who would die if someone fired toward the ceiling and hit a head. She slid along the wall until she could lift the tray without a scrape. She turned her body and threw it like a discus. It flew flat and fast and hit the flanker behind the ear. The sound was dull and ugly. The man wobbled. His barrel tipped toward the chandelier. The leader turned his head. The rhythm broke. Catherine was already moving. 3 long steps, bottle in hand. The marble edge of a nearby table turned glass into a blade with one clean strike. The second flanker brought his pistol up a half-beat late. She did not aim for his chest. She drove the jagged neck into the meat of his forearm, just below the elbow. The hand opened. The gun dropped. Her knee found the target between his legs. Her palm rose up under his nose and snapped his head back. Blood sheeted. The man folded. 5 seconds. 2 men off the board. The room froze. People stared at the woman they had not seen a minute ago. They stared at the waitress who had stepped from the wall like a shadow with teeth. The leader yelled something short and hard at the man who had hold of DeLuca's arm. The man pulled. The leader fired twice at Catherine. The sound was a soft punch. The wood of a table cracked where her head had been. She rolled and took cover, hand flat, breath steady. "Take him now," the leader snapped. Adrian DeLuca twisted once and stomped down hard on a foot. The man holding him grunted. DeLuca's elbow drove back. It was not pretty. It was not trained. It bought a heartbeat. "Kitchen," Catherine called. Her voice cut clean across the floor. "Now." DeLuca did not argue. He did not ask for a plan. He moved on his hands and knees, shoulders low, as glass bit the fabric of a suit that had never met a floor before. He reached the mahogany slab that shielded Catherine. She shoved a metal candelabrum to the ground. It spun and clanged between them and the men who wanted a shot. Then she ran, pushing the kitchen door wide with her shoulder. The door swung shut behind them and gave them a different world. Stainless steel, heat from the line, hiss of steam, knife handles in a block. White jackets bunched near the walk-in. Wide eyes. "Stay down," Catherine said to the cooks and dishwashers, her voice steady. "Stay quiet." She did not look at Adrian first. She looked at the room. She looked at exits. She looked at weight. She looked at what could roll and what could fall and what could smash a wrist if you put it in exactly the right place. A hand touched the counter behind her. It was the man from table 7. He stood close, but not too close. A man who had learned not to crowd a person who knows what she is doing. His face had lost the smooth mask of the dining room. He looked like a human being and not a name. "Who are you?" he asked. Catherine did not answer the question. Questions slowed the work. She moved to the door's round glass and checked the dining room through a quarter-inch of vision. She saw shadows moving. She heard a voice she did not know call out a name she did. "Ethelred," she said. "What is it to you?" "Business," he said. "Whose ruin?" she asked. "Play the name." He took a breath. "Walter Thorne." "Family company," she said. "3 generations." "Yes." "Dead?" He did not blink. "Last month." She nodded once. The leader's words fit now. This was not a ransom. It was not a message to the market. It was something old and simple. Blood answers grief when grief is not met with mercy. The door shook under a blow. The handle jumped. "They're coming," he said. "I know." Catherine reached for the rack of sheet pans and shifted it out into the lane where a man with a gun would have to step. She lifted a chef's knife, felt its balance, its weight, the way the handle settled in her palm. She did not miss the other life in that movement. She noted it. She let it pass. "When I move," she said, looking at him for the first time, "you do exactly what I say. No questions, no pause." His eyes did not look away. "Understood." The door banged open. The man who had watched the entrance stepped into the kitchen with his pistol held low and forward. Catherine kicked the rack into him. Metal crashed against his shin. He stumbled back. She drove the butt of the knife into the nerves at his wrist. His fingers uncurled. The gun hit steel and skittered. She brought her elbow up and into his chest. The breath left him. One more step. Her knee rose. The head snapped back against the walk-in handle. He slid down, stunned. The voice from the dining room cut through steam and clang. "DeLuca," the leader called. "Silas Thorne. Does the name sit right in your mouth?" Silas. Of course. "You can't stay in there," Silas shouted. "You can't run either. You hear me, waitress? You're dead the second I see you." Catherine turned to the back of the kitchen. The steel door that led to the alley sat under an exit sign. It was heavy and bolted. She placed her ear to it and heard the simple sound of metal on metal from the other side. Someone had locked it from the alley with a bar through the handle. They had been boxed. "We have to go," the man at her shoulder said. "The police will be here." "Not yet," she said, "and not at the back." He went quiet. The cook stared up from the floor, the way people look at an expert in a storm. She scanned the ceiling and saw the vent hood above the main grill. The duct was large. Not generous, but possible. "The vents," she said. "They'll go up." "You can't be serious," he said. "It's a way they don't watch," she said. "You'll boost me." He dragged a prep table beneath the hood without being told. He laced his fingers without another question. She put the knife flat between her teeth. Grease on the metal made her hands slide. She caught a seam and pulled. She felt his hands at her shoe. He locked his wrists, legs braced, and lifted. She gained the lip and threw an arm in. Dust fell. The duck scratched skin and suit and pride. "Your turn," she said, reaching back. His forearm met her grip. She pulled. The steel groaned. He grunted, not from weakness, but from the way a body protests doing something it was never meant to do. They went up into the dark, and the noise of the dining room fell away like a radio turned to low. Below them, the kitchen door slammed open. A voice swore. A man shouted to check the roof. Catherine breathed out once. The shaft answered with a dry echo. She did not think about Beirut then. She did not think about the car that had come from nowhere, or the way a street can become an enemy. She kept her mind on the next rung and the next breath and the slab of night above them that promised air. They climbed toward that thin square of lesser dark, two people who had not planned to stand in the same hour of life and were now tied to each other by the oldest rule there is. Do not die here if there is a way not to. Rain tapped the metal like quiet fingers. The city's noise drifted up in a soft wash. The duct opened to a panel. Catherine set her shoulder and felt it resist. She pressed harder. Russ sighed. The panel gave and swung out. Cold air hit her face. She pulled herself onto the gravel and then reached back again. She took his wrist and felt the solid weight of him, then the lift as he joined her on the roof. They lay there for a second side by side, breathing the night and the faint smell of wet tar. The city rose on all sides, tall and sure. A metal door on the far wall jerked open. A man stepped through with a gun in his hand and anger in his face. Catherine pushed Adrian behind the nearest bank of metal units without ceremony. A shot cracked. It echoed between buildings. The old jazz down in the dining room could not be heard here. The night had its own music. Sirens far away. Wind, rain, the hum of machines. She glanced around the roof. She did not waste more than one heartbeat on fear. She found the lines that might keep them alive. She found the game they could still play. The chapter of the dining room had closed. The next one opened above the city, in the wet and the dark, with a door and a man and just enough space to make a plan. Rain stitched faint lines across the roof. The city breathed below them, a low ocean of engines and late voices. The door on the far side banged open, and a man stepped out with his pistol high and bare. He had taken off the suppressor. He wanted noise now. He wanted the whole night to listen. Catherine pulled Adrian behind a block of humming metal and felt the bullet crack past the edge. The sound rang against steel and vanished into the sky. "He's alone," she said. "How sure?" Adrian's voice was low, steady. "Sure enough," she said, peering past the unit for a half second. "He thinks we're cornered. We'll use that." Adrian did not argue. He did not count their odds. He leaned his back to the metal, breathing slow to quiet his chest. Rain gathered on his sleeves and ran in dark threads to his cuffs. The roof was a grid of shapes and shadows. Air handlers, a row of pipes like ribs along the edge, a metal junction box the size of a suitcase bolted to a wall. A short length of forgotten pipe lay beside it, dull in the wet. Catherine saw a path that would last 30 seconds if luck held. She shifted closer to Adrian and put a hand on his shoulder. It was a firm, quick touch, the kind a field medic gives when there is no time to soften the truth. "I need his attention on you," she said. "You pull him away from the door. Bring him into the open. Keep him talking." Anger works. Adrian met her eyes. "What do you want me to say?" "Enough to make him move," she said. "Not enough to make him shoot blind." He gave a single nod. "Understood." She slid away, staying low, the soles of her shoes whispering over wet gravel. The pipe answered her hand with real weight. She kept it close to her leg and moved along the line of vents until the junction box stood within reach. Adrian counted to 2 in his head and stepped from cover. "Silas," he called. The name carried across the roof. The rain made a thin hiss on the metal. The man aimed over the sights and held him in the notch. Even at distance, hatred showed in the set of his jaw. "Don't say my name," he said. "You don't get to say it." Adrian did not raise his hands. He did not peach. He held himself the way he did in a church pew, composed, grounded, shoulders squared. The ring on his finger was a small glint in the dim. "Your father built something that lasted," he said. His voice stayed close to the ground. That was his pride. Pride doesn't balance ledgers. Silas took a step out from the doorway. The barrel followed Adrian's chest. "You smiled while you broke him." "I don't smile at funerals," Adrian said. "I pay what's due." "What you owe can't be counted," Silas said, moving another step, closing the distance. "It's measured in nights like his last one." Adrian moved one slow pace left, away from the line that would give Silas the easiest shot. He did not look back at the vents. He left that air clear for the person who could turn this moment into a door. "Your father was not weak," Adrian said. "He was proud. Pride blinded him. The market didn't kill him. Pride did." "Shut up," Silas said. The word cracked. He came farther into the open, away from the door's steel. He wanted face to face. He wanted to see the eyes. Down the line of heavy units, Catherine reached the junction box. She set the pipe's end into the seam. Rust was stronger than it looked. She leaned more weight and felt the lid give. The box opened like a jaw. Inside, fat cables lay in thick curves, black and wet and dangerous. Rain hissed where it touched bare metal. The city's pulse ran through those veins. She looked once to judge distance. She listened for Adrian's voice and for the small cues in Silas's tone that meant his feet were still moving. "Do you remember the day you signed in the personal guarantee?" Adrian asked. "You thought it made you brave. It made you alone." Silas's answer came like a knife. "Alone is what you made him. Alone is what pride makes," Adrian said. "I have my father's rules. You have your father's last night." Silas took 2 quick steps, gun steady, focus narrowed. He wanted the space where he could see the mouth shape the words, where the shot would be a decision and not an impulse. He wanted to end it up close. Catherine jammed the pipe across the bus bars and drove it in hard. Light erupted in a white-blue sheet. The roof leapt. The hum of the units died in one breath. For a half-second, the world flashed with a light that erased edges and turned everything into bones and wire. Silas flinched. His shoulders lurched. The gun drifted. Catherine ran. She came out of shadow like the rain itself and drove the pipe into his knee. The sound was clean and sick. Silas went down with a cry that emptied his chest. The gun jumped from his hand and slid into darkness. She was on him in the same motion. The cleaver was a flat, cold promise against his throat. Her breath showed in the damp air. It touched the steel and made a brief fog. "It's done," she said. Silas's hand clawed at gravel and stopped. Pain took his strength and left heat. His mouth worked around words that would not help him. Adrian did not move toward them. He stayed where he was and watched the lines that could still turn to danger. The doorway, the edge, the place where a last shot could come from a last man. Below, sirens climbed from far to near. The sound came up the walls in long, rising threads. "He's got one left downstairs," Catherine said, eyes still on Silas. "And we don't know where Frank is." Adrian stepped closer, just enough to take Silas fully into view. He looked at the man on the ground the way he looked at a problem set on his desk in a dim room. Calm, exact. "Your name will not fix him," he said quietly. "It won't fix you." "Tell that to an empty chair," Silas spat. "Tell it to my mother." Catherine pulled zip ties from his pouch, wrenched his arms behind him, and locked the plastic tight. She checked his ankles. She took his radio and earpiece and slid them away with her foot. She did not argue with him. She did not offer comfort. She was not his judge or his priest. She was a woman who wanted the night to end without more blood. "We move," she said to Adrian. "Fire escape." They crossed the roof to the far corner, where the old metal ladder clung to brick. The alley below was a dark throat. The smell reached up. Wet cardboard, old oil, a slant of rot. The sirens were louder now. The city was sending its answer. Catherine tested the first rung. It held. She knelt and wiped rain from her palms. Then she stopped and looked at Adrian. Down fast, 3 points on the rail at all times. If you slip, you cling to the frame and breathe. Don't look at the ground. Look where your hand needs to go next. Understood, he said. She swung over the edge. The ladder shook once and then held her weight. She set a steady rhythm, hand, foot, and took the first flight to the platform. Adrian followed, slower, controlled, refusing to lean back into open space. He kept his chest close to the ladder and moved like he was leaving a place of honor one rung at a time. They worked their way down, platform to platform. A window lit by a blue television glow slid past to their left. A cat watched from behind a curtain and did not blink. Water ran in thin lines down the brick. Far off, a car horn laid on a long note and quit. On the last platform, 10 feet from the alley floor, Catherine stopped and listened. Voices carried when the night was like this. The sirens pushed sound into corners. She heard a clatter at the street mouth, then a shouted order, then radio hiss. The main entrance would choke with uniforms. The alley would be quiet for one more breath. She dropped the last 10 feet. The landing sent a clean jolt through her legs. She pivoted and scanned. Dumpsters, stacked crates, a door with a flickering light over it, another door in deep shadow farther down. The narrow rectangle held its own weather. Clear, she said. Adrian let himself down and stepped beside her. His suit coat was torn at the shoulder. A thread hung and caught on a nail, then snapped. They started for the street end, moving along the wall, keeping to the broken line of cover the dumpsters cast. Catherine's knife was in her hand, blade low. She kept the edge turned away from her own body, old habits falling into place like tools into a tray. At the bend where the alley widened a foot, a voice came out of dark. Evening. They stopped as one unit. A man stepped into the thin wash from the flickering light, gun in hand, shoulders square. He was not one of Silas's crew. He wore no mask. Rain darkened his jacket on the shoulders and collar. Frank Miller. Adrian stood very still. He did not raise his hands. He did not reach. He took in the set of Frank's mouth, the way the right side dipped as if pulled by a weight. He took in the shine of sweat on his forehead that was not from the rain. Frank, he said, and the name held 12 years of doors and cars and streets crossed at the right moment. Boss, Frank said. The word was dry. It had no respect left in it. Step away from her. Catherine stepped in front of Adrian without thought. The alley was a bad place for a blade. The gun was close enough to make angles matter and too far to close clean. She saw nothing she liked. The trash lid on the nearest bin was heavy metal. It might move a shot a quarter inch. It might not. You chose the wrong side, Adrian said. I chose the side that looked me in the eye, Frank said, anger climbing. The man upstairs knows what I'm worth. And what's that? Adrian asked. Frank swallowed. A man's word, a man's peace. You had both, Adrian said. You still do if you're standing here with your hands empty. Frank's mouth twitched. He lifted the gun a fraction higher. Don't try it. The sirens turned a corner at the far end of the block. Red and blue washed faintly over brick and pooled in puddles. The city was narrowing the night. Catherine shifted her weight a half-inch and filed the motion away. Not yet. Not on a guess. She needed his eyes off her for one heartbeat. Why now? Adrian asked. You could have walked the day you felt proud. You didn't. Frank's jaw tightened. Because I kept believing you'd see me. Then you didn't. Then he did. He bought you, Adrian said. He listened, Frank shot back. He talked to me like a man at a table, not like a chair by a door. Tables tip, Adrian said. Chairs hold. You would know, Frank said. You've sat at every table in this city. Catherine's gaze slid to the nearest dumpster. The lid's hinge was a fat bar of steel welded to the body. The lid would swing with more weight than it looked like it had if you put your hands right and threw your shoulder into it. The angle from the hinge to Frank's wrist gave her a narrow window. If she made him fire wide, the round might slam brick and shriek. Not clean, not safe, but the only door she could see. Adrian took one step forward. It was not dramatic. It was enough to catch a man's eye. "Frank," he said. Just the name again. Low. Even. "I give my word. Walk away now, you live." "I don't say it twice," Frank blinked. The gun's muzzle drifted. Surprise and old habit pulled at him from two directions. Catherine moved. She grabbed the dumpster lid and wrenched it up hard. The metal screamed. She shoved the lid sideways into Frank's forearm. The blow smashed bone before it smashed breath. The shot went off at the wall and threw sparks down the alley like angry bees. Frank yelled and dropped the gun. It clanged and spun. Catherine covered the space in one hard step and put her shoulder into his chest. Frank hit the wall with a sound that took the fight out of him. He slipped down, breathless, cradling an arm that hung wrong at the wrist. "Don't," she said, knife at the ready, eyes on his other hand. He didn't. He folded around the pane and looked at the ground. The restaurant's back door banged open. Two uniformed officers came through fast, guns up, voices trained for nights like this. "NYPD, drop the weapon, hands high." Catherine let the knife fall and opened her hands. Adrian did the same, palms out. Stance empty, head still. "On your knees," one officer said. They complied. The alley filled with loud light. A minute stretched into a long, careful ritual. Hands taken, cuffs cold, quick pat-downs that were not cruel, just practiced. Names asked and given. The second uniform's eyes scanned faces, looked at the torn suit and the blood on Catherine's sleeve, and softened a fraction. "Stand," the first officer said after his radio chirped and a voice confirmed pieces of the chaos. "Slow." They stood. The cuffs came off with a click. The breath that both of them had kept measured finally came a little deeper. From the street entrance, red and blue spilled stronger into the alley. A detective in a long coat stepped in, hair damp, jaw set. He took the scene in the way people do when they have seen too many scenes and still care how this one ends. "Corrigan, Mafia," he said, tapping his chest with a knuckle by way of introduction. "You two are the reason my night got interesting." Catherine didn't smile. "We're the reason it ended." Corrigan's eyes held hers for a second. He nodded once, a small private gesture that told her he had seen the tape on nights like this, and he knew what civilians did and did not do under pressure. He turned to Adrian and looked at the ring, the watch, the torn cloth. "Mr. DeLuca," he said, "will want your statement." Adrian inclined his head. "You'll have it." Paramedics moved past with a stretcher. Another unit hustled Frank up and out, his arms stabilized, his face sullen and pale. A third pair of officers guided a limping man in black, Silas, toward the mouth of the alley. His knee was braced and his hands bound. He stared at Adrian with eyes that wanted a different ending and got this one. Catherine watched him pass. He said nothing. So did she. Corrigan pointed toward the restaurant. "Inside," he said. "Let's get warm and get it down while you still remember the order of the seconds." Catherine picked up the knife by the spine, not the handle, and handed it to the nearest uniform. Evidence. Her hands were steady now. The tremor that sometimes comes after was not here yet. It might never come. Some nights it didn't. Adrian looked at her as they walked, a glance that was not gratitude and not command. It was acknowledgement. Two people who had stood in a narrow place and moved through it together. "You set the tempo," he said quietly. "Someone had to," she said. He gave the smallest nod. "My word, the kitchen staff will be paid while they're closed, and more." "That's later," she said. "First you tell the detective exactly what you saw." "I will." They stepped through the back door into heat, light, steam, and the tight clatter of a kitchen that had just watched its world break and then knit back together. White jackets sat on crates. Eyes were red. A man at the dish sink wiped his face with the back of his wrist and tried to look like he had not. "Sit," a paramedic said to Catherine, guiding her to the bumper of an ambulance inside the loading bay. She held it out. The cut was long and clean where glass had kissed her. The medic irrigated it and wrapped it in white. She watched the door to the alley while he worked and listened to the detective begin with Adrian. Time, names, directions, distances, the shape of the gun, the first sound, the last. The city's sirens faded a little as the first wave settled in. Radios popped and murmured. A clipboard scratched. Somewhere in the dining room, the piano lid had fallen shut, and the single long note that had vibrated in the wires when the blast hit had gone still. Catherine exhaled and let the breath go all the way out. The worst of the night had passed. It still had one more page to turn. Statements, phones, a ride to a precinct, or a promise to show in the morning. Sleep would come later and might be thin. That was fine. She had lived through thinner. Adrian finished the first pass with caution and crossed the loading bay. He stopped a respectful distance away. "They told me your name," he said. "Catherine." She looked up. "Kate is fine." "Kate," he said as if he were setting the word in his mind where important things stay. "You saved lives. I kept people moving," she said. "The rest is luck and timing." "Luck finds the hands that know what to do with it," and he said. He did not make an offer, not yet. The moment did not belong to money. It belonged to air that no longer smelled like broken glass and fear. Outside, a burst of fresh siren approached and then quieted as another patrol slid into place. The night settled into the careful order that follows disaster. The roof, the alley, the broken window, they were now scenes with numbers and tape. The city would write them down and then file them. Adrian glanced toward the kitchen staff clustered by the walk-in. "You were right about them." "They did what they were told," she said. "That's courage enough." "It is," he said. He was quiet for a heartbeat. "It will be remembered." The paramedic taped the last corner of the bandage and patted it gently. "You're good," he said. "Keep it clean." "Thank you," she said. Corrigan lifted his chin from across the room. "Your turn, Miss Novak." She stood. The bandage held. The hand that had held steel now held nothing at all. She walked toward the table where forms waited, and the night, which had run like a fever, began to cool. The door to the alley let in one last drift of rain and then swung shut. The city went on talking to itself in the distance. Somewhere out there, dawn was already on its way, slow and gray and patient, as if it knew exactly how long to take. The dining room had the quiet of a church after a storm. Glass glittered where the windows had given way. Chairs sat at wrong angles. A candle, still burning, bent its flame toward a draft that no longer existed. Uniforms moved through the space like caretakers after a long night vigil. Careful, measured, speaking in voices that respected the hour. Detective Corrigan set a legal pad on a linen-draped table that had somehow kept its cloth. He did not sit. He stood with the ease of someone who prefers to be on his feet when he listens. He nodded to Kate, and she took the chair across from him, hands loose on her knees, bandage clean and white along her forearm. Adrian DeLuca stood a half step back, not looming, not leaving. He was simply present, a weight that did not need to announce itself. "Ms. Novak," Corrigan said, pen poised, "we'll keep this straight. If I get in your way, tell me. Start from the first thing that felt wrong." Kate let her eyes rest on the room for a second. She did not rewind theatrics. She rewound a series of small, clear pictures. "The van across the street," she said. "No side windows, double parked, wrong model, wrong time. Then the spotter by the alley holding a phone and not listening to it. Then the empty stool at the bar. Frank Miller's glass was still sweating. His straw wrapper was on the wood. He doesn't leave a post without a word." Corrigan's pen scratched. "You called the kitchen." "I headed there," what she said. "Reached for the door. The blast hit. Window imploded. Phones died. 5 men, diamond formation. 1 with a jammer, 1 on the door, 2 to the room, 2 to table 7. You saw guns." "Suppressed," she said. "Compact. Glocks or SIGs. Didn't stand to count the lines." "And you moved." "I moved to stop them from shooting at a scream," she said. "A scream was coming. It did. I used a tray, then a bottle. Took one man's balance, one man's weapon hand. It opened a line to the kitchen. We took it." "We," Corrigan echoed, eyes flicking to the man behind her. Kate nodded once. "He did what I told him to do." She did not turn. It wasn't a compliment or a slight. It was a line of fact, placed where it belonged. Corrigan's gaze returned to her. Then the kitchen. Choke points, cover, heat, noise, Kate said. Good terrain, until someone locked the alley door from the outside. They sealed it. We were boxed. We went up through the vents. Roof gave us air, also gave us Silas Thorne. Corrigan looked up, interest sharpening. You recognized him? He recognized himself, she said. He said his name. He wanted it heard. You took him on the roof. We shorted the box, Kate said. Flash bought a window. I took his knee. He's alive. He'll walk different and… Corrigan's pen stopped. He drew a short breath through his nose, as if to clear away the film of a picture he had seen in other rooms. And the fifth man? In the alley, Kate said. Frank Miller. She didn't add the emotion around it. She didn't need to. The alley would say it on its own once the reports were filed. He aimed. We moved. He missed the chance he thought he had. Corrigan made a final note, flipped the page, and glanced to Adrian. Mr. DeLuca. Adrian stepped forward, hands plain at his sides. He did not offer a card. He did not ask for a lawyer. He stood like a man who belongs to his own rules and understands that tonight had added a few written by someone else. I don't need your resume, Corrigan said. I need your 90 seconds, window to kitchen to roof. Adrian gave him exactly that. Not more, not less. He did not weigh words as if they were coins. He placed them down like keys and left them there. When he reached the alley, he stopped. You offered him a walk-away, Corrigan said. I gave my word, Adrian answered. Men point guns at you often? Corrigan asked, a neutral tone that could have been routine or a probe. Not often, Adrian said. I don't invite it. Corrigan's eyes lingered a fraction longer, then let it go. He gathered his pad, slid it into his coat pocket, and nodded to both. That'll do for now. You'll each get a typed copy. You'll sign if it's right. If it isn't, you'll fix it. Don't dodge my call. He turned to go, then looked back at Kate, studying the way she held her shoulders, the way her breath had evened. You've got training, he said, not a question. I've got practice, Kate said. Corrigan's mouth tipped a hair. Good night, Miss Novak. Try to make it one. He moved away to a knot of uniforms and tape. The dining room settled another inch. The piano's fallboard was still down. No one wanted music. The staff stood in the corridor between kitchen and floor, a small island of white coats and gray faces. The line cook with the burn on his wrist. The hostess whose hands were clenched around the reservation book as if it could anchor her to earth. The dishwasher with water on his shoes and an expression like a child in a storm. When Kate's eyes went to them, they looked back as if she were a bridge they had just crossed. She stood. The chair legs made no sound on the rug. You should sit, a paramedic murmured behind her. I'm fine, she said. Adrian stayed with her until she made the first step toward the corridor. Then he matched her pace half a stride back. He did not touch her arm. He did not steer. He followed the current she set. They stopped near the prep counter where service had ended and the night had started. No one spoke. For once, a restaurant did not feel the need to fill silence. You did well, Kate said to the group, simple as a clean knife. You listened. You stayed where I told you. You didn't run toward noise. That saved lives. The hostess's throat worked around a word that did not find air. The dishwasher nodded, quick, like a promise. Adrian looked at them and saw what he had told himself he saw on factory floors and in union halls. People whose names are not on brass plates and whose work holds the whole up. He had said it before. He had meant it, in his way. Tonight, the words were different because the night had put faces on them. He felt his pocket for a habit that was not there. He did not carry a pen. He rarely wrote anything twice. He looked at Kate. She understood without a glance the way two people who have worked a night together begin to share a language they have not agreed on. Detective Corrigan will need some particulars, she told the staff. You'll give them. When you go home, you won't sleep. That's normal. Drink water. Don't make any big decisions for 3 days. A line cook let out a sound that might have been a laugh if there had been more air. 3 days? Sometimes 5, Kate said. It passes. Adrian lifted his attention from the group to Kate. They'll be paid while the room is dark, he said. Full, and more. Her eyes moved to his. She gave half a nod. It was not approval. It was recognition that a promise had been made in a language she respected. The general manager, pale, shaken, found his way forward. He stumbled on the name he had used for years and tried again. Sir, the insurance is for walls, Adrian said, gentle enough to avoid cutting. People get envelopes. The GM swallowed and nodded like a student who has just been told where the light switch is and is grateful not to have to grope for it in the dark. The paramedic touched Kate's shoulder. Tetanus is up to date? Last year, she said. Good, he said, and moved on. They drifted toward the service bay, where the air was cooler, where the night could get in and move some of the smell of fear out. Lights flashed blue-white in the alley. Voices traded the simple words of logistics. Ladders, tape, photographs, bag it, mark it, move it. Adrian stood with his hands in front of him, fingers interlaced, as if to keep them from doing the old reflex of reaching for a cigarette he had given up a decade ago. The signet ring pressed against his thumb. The memory of Frank's face did not leave. 12 years of doors and cars and hallways. A man's word, sold for a look, in a cut, in a speech that made him feel seen. Adrian did not curse him. He did not forgive him either. He set the weight down in the part of himself that holds such things until they are needed. Why did you leave the work? He asked quietly, eyes on the alley while his voice stayed with Kate. She watched the rain make a clean line down the lip of the loading dock. The work did not leave me, she said. I brought it everywhere. Even here, I didn't want to live with it in my hands anymore. And yet you did, he said. Tonight. Tonight it was already here, she said. It asked for an answer. I gave one. He was silent for a moment that carried more meaning than a paragraph. Then, I have need for answers like that, not the kind that leave bodies, the kind that see the hole before a man falls in. She turned her head. You have men for that. I had a man for that, he said. He sat at my right hand for 12 years and thought he was a chair. I let him think it. Kate did not soften. He wanted a table. Tables tip, Adrian said, repeating his line without pride. Chairs hold. He looked at the small, damp world of the loading bay, the stacks of linen in their plastic, the dolly leaning idle. I make you a promise, not a job to pull you back where you don't want to be. A place at a quiet map. You call it consulting. I call it listening to the person in the room who sees the door no one else sees. She didn't answer. She let the offer sit. He did not crowd it with numbers. He did not fold bills around it. He simply let it breathe. Not tonight, she said at last. No, he said, tonight you go home. He reached inside his jacket and brought out a rectangle of matte black metal. No name, no logo, only a number etched in a way that would not wear out with fingers. He held it without extending it, as if to ask permission to offer. She took it. The weight was honest, cold from his pocket. She turned it once and slid it into the small pocket inside her jacket that usually carried a pen. If you ask me for something, he said, and I say it's done, it's done. I already asked, she said, chin tipping toward the corridor where the kitchen staff had gathered. You'll see it tomorrow, he said, in envelopes. A uniform approach with forms to sign and a polite hand gesture that said there were still steps before the night could be called a night. Adrian signed where the officer showed him to sign, writing each letter slowly, as if the act itself carried a vow. Kate read her statement, corrected one street number, and wrote her name in a hand that did not tremble. Detective Corrigan returned, coat buttoned against the beige draft. We'll walk you out, he said. He glanced from one to the other. You'll keep your heads down. Press will dig. They always do. If you don't want that, don't feed them. Understood, Adrian said. Miss Novak, Corrigan added, we'll likely need you in the morning. Call time. I'll try to make it civilized. It rarely is, Kate said. The corner of his mouth flicked. It was as close to a laugh as this hour could pay for. They stepped into the alley. The rain had thinned to a breath. The city's sirens had moved to other corners, as if the night was a machine with many small engines, and this one had done its run. A patrol car idled. Another slid away with a soft tire hiss and turned its lights off at the end of the block. The broken window, high above, was a black square now, taped and marked and cold. At the curb, a black sedan waited. Not the car that had been ordered, but one that had been found. The driver stood outside it, coat up, eyes down. He had been sent by a man who understood that tonight called for plain things. Adrian opened the rear door for Kate and then did not insist. He left it a choice. She shook her head. I'll take a cab, or I'll walk for a few blocks and let the air sort me. He accepted that with a slight bow of his head. There's a hospital if you want it. I don't, she said. Well, it's clean, it'll heal. Tomorrow, he said. You call me, or you don't. Either way, the envelopes arrive. Good night, Mr. DeLuca, she said. Good night, Kate, he answered. She turned up her collar and stepped out into the street's thin light. The city smelled like wet stone and the inside of a bell. She walked without hurry, the way she had walked between tables, the way she had walked under different skies with a radio in her ear, and a man at her shoulder who needed to live another day. She did not borrow trouble from tomorrow. She counted her breaths. She counted her steps. She let the night be only what it was. Finished enough. Behind her, Adrian watched until she took the corner and was gone. He did not get in the sedan. Not yet. He looked up at the dark square of the window and saw the night again, then let it pass. He took a brass lighter from his pocket, turned it in his hand, and put it back without opening it. He slid into the car and told the driver an address that was not home. The office was not Glass in City. It was an old room over a club that did not have a sign. Wood dark as a river at night. A table that had been polished by elbows in time. Lamps with cloth shades that shed amber on leather and framed icons. And a photograph of a factory floor where men in coveralls looked up at a camera in 1978 like they were not sure whether to smile. He stood by the table and looked at the empty chair across from his. Frank's chair. He imagined it bare in the morning. He pictured the men who would sit there for a while, each thinking they were ready to be something they were not. He thought of a woman who had set a tempo and made him move when she said move. He thought of the rules his father had given him. Short rules, not many, the kind that fit on a slip of paper that lives behind a photograph. No one harms family. A word given stands. Don't ask a man to beg. Don't offer what you won't carry yourself. He pulled a thick, plain envelope from the drawer and set it on the table. Then another. 12 in all. He wrote first names in a neat block hand he used for small things. He wrote bonus on each, a number inside that would not make a life but would ease the next month. He did not plan to say why. He planned to let them arrive. He picked up a phone that had no apps, only a dial pad and a cord. He pressed a number and waited while a line that no one else used connected. Peterson, a voice answered, guarded even at this hour. Gerard, Adrian said, the papers don't move tomorrow. A silence, then careful words. Do you want a delay? I want to correct, Adrian said. The workers keep their pensions intact. The severance language doubles. We fund a foundation in Walter Thorne's name, scholarships for his town, training for his line. It's not a headline, it's a ledger entry. Quiet, Gerard exhaled. That will change the talk. Let it, Adrian said. We do it, we don't sell it. I'll draft it, Gerard said, in the morning. Now, Adrian said, and hung up. He stood with his hand on the receiver for a long moment. The room held him the way rooms like this hold men who carry their choices in their pockets and take them out one at a time, knowing each has weight. He lifted the icon from the shelf and wiped its frame with his thumb, as if dust, too, had a way of returning when a man stopped looking at it. Outside, the rain thinned to nothing. Somewhere in the building, a vacuum cleaner hummed as a woman did the last of her work. The city did not care who had been saved and who had been broken. It would remember the story for a week, maybe 2. That was all right. The people who needed to remember would. Kate reached her apartment after 3 cabs passed her by, and the 4th one felt like too much noise. The building had a stair that creaked in an honest way. The radiator in her living room ticked. She set her jacket on the chair by the window and stood with the light off, looking out at a city that had put its shoulders down at last. She took the metal card from her pocket and held it in her palm. The number was a simple line of marks. The weight said something different. She set it on the sill. She filled a glass at the sink and drank half and then the rest. She sat on the edge of the bed and let her shoes find the floor without seeing where they landed. Sleep did not come. That was fine. She watched the dark lighten one shade. She thought of Beirut then, because the night had earned it. She saw the car blooming with heat and force. She heard a voice cry out and then cut off. She felt the uselessness of a weapon in a space that had no lines left. She counted her breaths until the memory thinned the way a tide thins when it runs out of room and has to go back where it came from. Morning stood just behind the curtain, ready to enter if she invited it. She did not yet. She let the last minutes of night stay, small and unimportant, like forgotten crumbs after service. She was not a waitress in her head anymore. She was not a guard. She was a woman who had moved people from one side of fear to the other. Sometimes that is all a life needs to be for one day. Adrian did not sleep either. He sent a short message to a man who could move envelopes without making noise. He sent another to a woman who kept the ledgers that mattered where lawyers could not see. He wrote 4 words to himself on a pad and tore the page and folded it and put it in his pocket next to the lighter. Keep the word clean. When the first light finally touched the edges of the old wood, he turned off the lamps. He stood a moment, listening to the room breathe. Then he went down the back stair and out into a city that had washed itself in the night and was ready to pretend it had not been dirty. The story would move to other voices now. Cameras, crawls, a photograph of a broken window, a clip of a man on a stretcher, grim with pain, a shot of a woman with a white bandage on her arm, her face set, her name mispronounced. It would be told in ways that did not know how to measure silence, or the tilt of a head, or the way a promise sits heavier than money. Ghost lessons repeat until someone hears them. Pride, debt, word, mercy. Tonight had said them out loud in plain speech to people who might choose differently next time. That was enough for one part of a life. It would have to be. By noon, envelopes would be on a manager's desk, unglamorous and solid. By evening, a draft with new terms would sit on Gerard's credenza, thick with corrections that meant something to men who hung their coats on pegs near machines. And by the time the next night came, a woman would sit at her window with the card on the sill and decide whether calling a number is the same as going backward, or whether it can be a map that points in a direction that does not require armor. For now, the city exhaled. The night was done. The lessons, for those who wanted them, were still warm. The rest could wait until part 4 found them. By afternoon, the rain had burned away. The city looked scrubbed, as if the storm had taken the noise with it. News vans parked along the curb outside El Corvo, lenses pointed at the blank plywood that now sealed the windows. Reporters stood in their pressed coats, talking into microphones about the billionaire rescue, the fortune, the mysterious waitress, and the violent echoes of a corporate feud. Kate Novak watched the coverage through the reflection of a bakery window as she waited for her coffee. The screen above the counter showed her own name in a caption that felt like it belonged to someone else. Catherine Novak, former soldier turned waitress, saves financier from abduction. She turned away before they reached the part with her photo, a grainy still from a security camera she hadn't known existed. The city needed its headlines, and it would get them. Her apartment smelled faintly of rain-soaked brick and cheap detergent when she came home. She hung her jacket, poured water into a glass, and opened the curtains just enough to see the river. The air was clean. She could breathe again, though the silence in her chest still felt like armor she hadn't taken off. On her windowsill lay the black metal card Adrian DeLuca had given her. No name, no logo, just the number. She hadn't touched it since she set it down at dawn. She told herself she wouldn't call, that the chapter was closed. But even unspoken, his presence lingered, not as a man, not even as gratitude, but as a question. What now? Across the city, Adrian DeLuca sat in his study, surrounded by quiet that didn't rest. The room smelled of oak and smoke and the faint sweetness of tobacco long extinguished. The lamp on his desk cast a circle of amber over the ledgers, the envelopes, and a single folded page that read in his own hand. Keep the word clean. Frank Miller's chair was gone. His belongings had been boxed. The men who came and went from the office that morning had spoken softly, out of respect or fear. Sometimes the two felt identical. Gerard Peterson arrived near noon, his tie loose, his tone cautious. The media's made it loud, he said. They're circling the name Ethel Red again. The Thorn Boys' arraignment is set. It's going to make noise. Adrian poured 2 small glasses of Lagavulin and pushed one toward him. Noise is fine. Truth is better. Gerard frowned. You really want to go through with this? Double severance, restore pensions, the foundation in Walter Thorne's name. It'll look like an admission. Adrian's reply was a small, deliberate shake of the head. It's a correction. From guilt? From balance, Adrian said. His tone was so even that Gerard couldn't tell if it was an explanation or an order. He built that company. I took it. I don't return what's gone. I build something that lives. Gerard took the glass but didn't drink. The board will scream. They can scream, Adrian said, voice low. Then they'll cash their dividends and sleep better than they did yesterday. He turned to the window. Outside, the city looked bright, unknowing. He watched it the way a man watches the tide, something that always comes back no matter what you throw into it. Kate's phone buzzed at twilight. Unknown number. She didn't need to look twice. She answered with a quiet, hello. A pause, then the unmistakable gravel of his voice. You told the truth last night. So did you. You're on the news, Adrian said. They made you a hero. I'm not, she said simply. Heroes get applause. I got stitches. He almost smiled. She could hear it, though his tone didn't change. You could come work for me, not as protection, as perspective. I told you, she said. That's not my life anymore. Maybe not the part with guns, he said, but you see cracks before they split. I need that. Kate let the silence hold. She watched the light fade on the buildings across the river, the sky turning the color of an old bruise. I'll think about it, she said finally. That's all I ask, Adrian replied. Take your time. There's no clock on my word. He didn't hang up immediately. Neither did she. For a few seconds, the sound of his slow breathing and the city hum behind it created something neither of them would name. Not connection, not comfort, just the simple awareness that two people who had walked through the same fire were still standing. 2 days later, Kate went to Il Corvo. The plywood was up, the marble floor swept clean of glass. The manager was there with the staff, unpacking crates of new dishes, voices cautious but steady. Envelopes sat stacked on the bar, each thick, each sealed. No names, just initials written in strong block letters. Mr. DeLuca sent them, the manager said when she asked. Full pay and a bonus. He said we'd reopen when we're ready, not when the insurance says. Kate nodded. That sounds like him. The hostess, the same young woman from that night, caught Kate's arm. We wanted to thank you. We didn't know how. You already did, Kate said gently. You kept calm. You stayed put. That's what kept you alive. The girl blinked fast, nodding, trying not to cry. Kate left before anyone could say more. Adrian watched her from the car, parked half a block away. He hadn't told her he'd be there. He wanted to see something small. How she carried herself now that the world had turned her into a story. She moved the same as before, quiet, measured, seeing everything, holding none of it too tight. When she walked past the car, she slowed for a moment, looked directly through the window and gave a small nod. Not recognition, permission, a silent truce. He tapped the glass once in return, a signal that meant understood, and drove away. The weeks that followed reshaped both of them in quiet ways. The Ethelred settlement finalized under new terms. Employees kept their pensions. The foundation opened in Walter Thorne's name, quietly, without a press release. DeLuca never spoke of it publicly. Those who tried to praise him found no comment to quote. He spent more time in his study, fewer nights at the clubs that carried his name on hidden ledgers. He still held meetings, still made decisions, but the edge had softened. The ruthlessness remained. The cruelty had dimmed. When younger men in his circle spoke too quickly or too loud, he silenced them with a look, then a line. We don't win by noise, we win by precision. He started carrying a small notebook again, a habit from before power, where he wrote nothing but short phrases. Clean word, write dead, protect the quiet ones. Kate's life also changed, though she kept it simple. She left the restaurant for good. With the settlement money and DeLuca's consulting offer, she began work as a freelance security analyst. Online, remote, anonymous. She mapped vulnerabilities in systems, restaurants, and private networks. She didn't carry a gun. She didn't wear a uniform. But she used her mind the way she used to use her body. Precisely. Sometimes in the late hours, when the city was between sirens, she would glance at the black card still on her windowsill. The number gleamed faintly in the moonlight. She never called. But she didn't throw it away either. One evening, almost 3 months after the night at El Corvo, she received a package by courier. No return label. Inside, a leather folder and a handwritten note. Consulting proposal. Thorn Foundation, Ethical Practices Initiative. If you agree, you'll help design what fairness looks like before the next war for it begins. AD. Beneath the note, an envelope with no amount written, only a line in his careful hand. Whatever it takes. Kate read it twice, then smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the mouth but warms the chest. She left the envelope unopened. That night she dreamed of Beirut again, but differently. The explosion was there, the dust, the weight. But when she turned, no one was gone. This time she had reached the car in time. This time no one was left behind. She woke to soft gray light and the sound of rain starting again. The city outside her window looked the same, but something in her had changed shape. The past, still there, but quieter now, like an old scar that only aches in the cold. Adrian DeLuca sat at his desk that same morning reading the latest reports from the Foundation. Walter Thorne's son, Silas, remained in custody. The papers said he'd accepted a plea. Adrian didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply nodded once and set the report aside. He reached for his lighter but didn't use it. Instead, he opened the drawer, took out the folded note that still read, "Keep the word clean," and placed it under the glass of his desk. A reminder in plain sight. A small envelope lay beside it. Inside, a single sheet of paper, handwritten by Kate Novak. "I'll take the job, but on my terms. No weapons, no lies, no noise, only structure and truth. KN." He read it once, folded it carefully, and slipped it into his breast pocket like something worth protecting. That night, the city's skyline burned gold against the clouds. Somewhere below, a woman sat by her window with the rain whispering against the glass, and a man in a dark suit walked alone through the quiet of his private world. Neither knew what the next storm would ask of them, or whether their paths would cross again. But both understood the same lesson now, that survival isn't just staying alive. It's keeping your word when the world tries to take it from you. The night closed softly, the rain falling steady and fine. The gilded cage was empty now, but in its silence, something honest had been born. A kind of peace that didn't need forgiveness to exist. The seasons in New York change quietly when you stop looking for them. Kate noticed it in the light first, how it bent softer against the water, how the air smelled less like rain and more like iron. The city was moving again, the way it always does after it survives something. Headlines fade, streets forget, but people, the ones who lived it, carry small reminders under their skin like shrapnel they never bothered to remove. She still worked from her small apartment near the East River. The place was tidy in the way that soldiers' quarters always are. Clean lines, no clutter, nothing without purpose. Her desk held 3 objects: a laptop, a ceramic mug chipped at the rim, and the black metal card that she never put away, but never touched either. She was good at what she did. The consulting work with the Thorn Foundation was steady, meaningful in ways that made her feel almost whole. She reviewed proposals, flagged inconsistencies, created guidelines for ethical conduct in mergers and acquisitions. It was strange work for someone who once measured danger in bullet trajectories, but she'd learned that corruption and violence were cousins. They just wore different suits. And sometimes when she found a loophole or an irregularity that would have ruined a smaller company, she smiled, because she knew Adrian DeLuca would quietly close it the next morning. They hadn't spoken since she'd sent her note months ago. Their communication now lived in the spaces between corrections, a silent correspondence written in decisions rather than words. Adrian, on the other hand, had not changed his world. He had rearranged it. The DeLuca Group, once infamous for its ruthless takeovers, now operated with a strange kind of discipline. Deals were still made, fortunes still shifted hands, but the tone had changed. He listened more, spoke less. He had built a small circle around him. Men who had worked the docks, women who had run family restaurants, people who understood weight and consequence. They met not in skyscraper boardrooms, but in the wood-paneled back rooms of old clubs that smelled of tobacco and time. Every Friday, Adrian would sit at the head of that table and go through one rule he'd written on an index card. No one breaks bread alone. A debt paid twice is better than one left unpaid. Never raise your voice when your silence does the work. Some of them thought it was philosophy, others knew it was survival. The city's undercurrent, the one that never makes the papers, began to treat his name differently. He was still feared, yes, but now there was something else mixed with the fear. Respect. One late evening, Kate received an encrypted message through the Foundation's secure channel. The sender ID was hidden, but the phrasing was unmistakable. Need a private audit on a grant proposal. Potential leak in one of the shell accounts. Nothing official. Discretion absolute. It didn't say AD, but she knew. She sighed, pushed her chair back, and began tracing the financial trail. Within an hour, she found it. A charity in Palermo, laundering money through subcontracted construction projects. The signatures were clever, masked behind 6 intermediaries. But one name repeated in the metadata, Franco Morelli. She frowned. She knew the name. Former lieutenant of the Giordano family. Went underground 2 years ago. Now resurfaced under a new alias. She picked up the black card and dialed the number she'd memorized but never used. He answered on the second ring. Kate, his tone was level, not surprised. You have a leak in the Foundation's European accounts, she said. A big one. Someone's using the Palermo initiative to move money that doesn't belong to you. A pause. She could almost hear the click of him standing up, the soft sound of a lighter opening and closing. Do you have proof? Enough to ruin 3 people in one bank, she said. I'm sending you the file. I trust your word, he said simply. You shouldn't, she replied. Trust the data. It's cleaner. A small silence followed, the kind that stretched like a held breath. Come to the villa in Amalfi, he said finally. We'll go through it together. Kate hesitated. I don't fly across the ocean for accounting errors. This isn't accounting, he said. This is war in numbers, and I need someone who knows both languages. She didn't say yes, she didn't say no. She ended the call, stared out the window, and let the city lights flicker like Morse code across the glass. By morning, she had a ticket. The DeLuca Villa sat on a cliff above the Tyrrhenian Sea. It was nothing like the marble excess of New York penthouses. This place was carved from stone, shaded by olive trees, built by hands that had worked the same soil for centuries. When Kate arrived, the first thing she noticed was the quiet. Not the empty kind, but the heavy, living silence of places that have seen too much and learned not to speak of it. Adrian met her on the terrace. No suit this time, just a black shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, a gold ring glinting faintly in the late sunlight. The sea behind him looked endless. Coffee, he asked. Only if you drink it too. He poured 2 cups himself. No servants, no ceremony, just 2 people in the slow rhythm of waves below. They went over the files in silence. Kate explained her findings, the forged ledgers, the digital fingerprints, the pattern of offshore routing. Adrian listened, expression unreadable. When she finished, he said quietly, Franco Morelli used to work under my father. He learned that loyalty can be bought. I never trusted him. You didn't have to, she said. He trusted you. That's how leaks start. Adrian looked at her, then out toward the water. You ever think about the people who slip through your fingers? All the time, she said. He nodded once, as if he had expected that. That night, after the work was done, they stood outside beneath the terrace lights. The air smelled of lemon and salt. You were right, Adrian said. This wasn't an error. It was a message. Someone's reminding me that the old rules still exist. And what will you do? Rewrite them, he said simply. Kate studied his face. The same man who once devoured companies now spoke of rebuilding codes, of clean words and debts paid twice, but she knew. Men like him never changed completely. They evolved, they disguised, they redirected the same hunger toward quieter things. You'll make enemies, she said. I already have, he replied. But now, at least, I'll know we. The waves hit the rocks below with a rhythm that felt almost human. Kate turned toward the sea, eyes narrowing against the wind. Do you ever stop fighting, Adrian? He smiled faintly. Only when I'm sleeping. And do you? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next morning, Kate packed her bag. Before leaving, she left a single note on his desk beside the closed laptop. You can't build peace with people who profit from war. Cut them off. KN. By the time he found it, she was already gone. Arian read the note twice, folded it neatly, and tucked it into his jacket. He called Palermo that afternoon. His instructions were clear and final. No shouting, no threats. Just names, dates, and one closing line. Send them home. All of them. Empty-handed. When he hung up, the silence in the room felt like absolution. That night, Kate's flight landed back in New York. The air smelled of asphalt and stories waiting to happen. She turned her phone on. One message waited. You were right. It's done. No signature. None needed. She smiled softly and walked out into the night. For the first time in years, she felt something that wasn't vigilance or duty or fear. It was peace. Fragile, earned, and quiet. She didn't know if she'd ever see him again. Maybe she would. Maybe not. But she knew this. Whatever world Adrian DeLuca ruled, it now had one voice in it that spoke the truth. And for both of them, that was enough. The days moved quietly in the city. Adrian DeLuca spent most of them in the same corner room where the light never reached directly, a place that smelled of old wood and paper and smoke. The phone calls had grown fewer, the noise around his name softer, but the stillness brought with it a different kind of weight. He had built an empire on control, on knowing every movement before it happened. And now that control had turned inward. It had become a kind of inventory of his own life. The walls of his study carried the ghosts of men who had once been called family. His father's photograph hung above the shelf, a hard face with soft eyes, the kind of man who taught with silence and expected answers without asking questions. Adrian had kept his father's code alive longer than he had meant to. Word stands. Family first. Never let debt define you. But the years had twisted those rules into something else. He opened the drawer where he had placed the folded notes from Kate. There were only two of them, but he read them as if they were scripture. One spoke of peace and the other of clean words. He touched the paper with his thumb, then set it aside and picked up the day's reports. Palermo was calm. The foundation's projects were stable. The board still whispered, but their whispers no longer reached him. In the spaces between meetings, he had begun visiting his mother's house in Brooklyn. It was small and unguarded, a relic of a time before suits and deals. She made coffee strong enough to peel the truth off a man's tongue. He never told her about the night in the restaurant. She never asked. She spoke of the garden, of her knees that no longer bent, of the neighbors who still called him Tony when they saw him on the street. To them, he was still the quiet boy who had left and come back with expensive shoes and a face that looked older than its years. He liked that version of himself better. It was simpler. Kate's days were different. The foundation work had expanded, drawing her deeper into the tangle of people and motives she once swore she would never face again. She found herself sitting in meetings where men spoke too long about ethics they didn't understand. Sometimes she would watch them the way she once watched rooms for threats, measuring their words against the rhythm of their breathing. She knew who lied before they finished a sentence. The habit had not died. It had simply changed uniform. She lived alone, still by the river, but she had added small comforts she never used to allow. A plant that leaned toward the light, a record player with a slow jazz album that played when she forgot to turn it off. The nightmares had grown fewer. When they came, they no longer ended in fire. Now they ended in quiet. One afternoon, she received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was older, fragile, a woman's voice that trembled with warmth. "It's Maria DeLuca," the woman said. "Adrian's mother. He told me once you were someone who understood storms. I wanted to thank you. He's been different lately." Lighter, if that's possible. Kate smiled faintly, though the woman couldn't see it. "I think he found something he'd been looking for," she said. "I think he found someone who reminded him what promises are for," Maria replied. Then after a pause, she added softly, "You saved my son." Kate didn't correct her. She only said, "He saved himself." After the call, she stood by the window for a long time, watching the ferries move slowly across the gray water. She thought of Adrian as she had last seen him on the terrace in Amalfi, the sea wind pulling at his shirt, his voice low and certain. The distance between them felt real, but not final. That night, Adrian dreamed of his father. In the dream, they sat at the same table where he had once been scolded for skipping church. The old man poured 2 glasses of wine and said nothing for a long while. Then he looked at Adrian and said quietly, "You learned the rules. Now learn when to break them." He woke before dawn, the sound of the waves from the memory still in his ears, though he was hundreds of miles from the sea. By morning, he had made a decision. He wrote a letter not on company paper but by hand, in blue ink that smeared slightly when he signed it. It was addressed to Kate Novak, care of the foundation. He did not say her name in the greeting, only wrote, "You were right. Peace is not built by force. It is built by choice. You gave me that truth. I intend to spend the rest of my life proving I heard it. If you ever need me, I will answer before the second ring, A." The letter was delivered by hand 3 days later. Kate read it at her desk, folded it carefully, and set it beside the black card. She didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She only breathed slow and steady, as if her lungs had finally remembered how to move without permission. Months passed. The world forgot the night at the restaurant. The newspapers found new heroes and new scandals. The foundation flourished quietly. The people from the kitchen each received not only their bonuses but also handwritten notes from the DeLuca office, small words of gratitude that none of them had expected. It became a story they told in the back rooms after closing time. The night the world cracked open and a waitress saved them all. Kate walked sometimes along the river at dusk. The city lights shimmered in the water, and she would think about how thin the line was between violence and grace. Somewhere across the ocean or maybe across town, Adrian was walking through his own silence, keeping his word clean. She didn't need to see him to know. Some connections don't require presence. They exist in the quiet understanding between two people who have both seen too much and still chose decency. In time, the nightmare stopped completely. Her dreams changed. Now she dreamed of a kitchen filled with light, of laughter echoing through a place that had once known fear. She dreamed of a man sitting at a table, his head bowed, not in defeat but in reflection. She dreamed of a life that had found its balance, where every scar had a purpose and every debt had been paid. The city carried on, indifferent but alive, and in a small apartment by the river, a woman sat by her window as morning broke over the skyline. She didn't wait for the phone to ring. She didn't need to. Somewhere out there, in a villa above the sea or a dark room above a quiet club, a man was keeping his word, and that was enough.